Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I have to tell you, today feels, it feels a lot different than our usual shows.
Yeah, it really does.
Usually, we grab a business book or maybe pull out some interesting facts about productivity history, maybe learn a little something about how the world works, and then we move on.
Right, a standard review.
Exactly. But today,
Oh,
we are looking at something that feels less like a typical book and a lot more like like a tactical briefing.
a survival guide almost.
Yeah, an evacuation plan for the modern man. That's actually what it claims to be.
It really is a heavy hitter today. I mean, I was reading through this over the weekend, and the urgency in the text is just palpable. It's not really asking for your attention, it's demanding it. It reads like a transmission from a bunker, honestly.
That is the perfect way to put it. So the source material we are covering today is titled Manosphere Guilds, and the subtitle is Rebuilding Tradition, Recreating Institutions, and the Living Spirit of Western Civilization.
Kamal.
It is a massive title. It's a 2026 release by an author named Conrad Riker. And look, before we even take one step into this rabbit hole, and believe me when I say it is a deep, dark rabbit hole we're going down today, I have very specific instruction for you listening right now.
Absolutely.
If you want us to keep bringing you this kind of unfiltered, deep analysis of really controversial and complex topics, you need to hit like and subscribe right now.
Yeah, do it right now.
It supports the show, obviously, but it also signals to us that you want the hard truths and the deep dives, not just the surface level fluff.
And I'll add to that because we are going to spend the next hour or so unpacking this text, but frankly, we can't cover everything.
Not even close.
This book is so dense. It is packed with legal citations, historical footnotes, economic theory. If you are listening to this and you start nodding your head, if you feel that sort of click of recognition that we're talking about, your actual life, do not hesitate. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books right now, and buy Manosphere Guilds by Conrad Riker.
Yep, it's available right now.
Our goal today is to show you exactly why you need this book in your library.
And for those of you who want to stay plugged into this author's mindset on a daily basis,
Yeah.
you need to follow him at Conrad N. Riker on Substack. That's all one word, Conrad N. Riker. That is where the daily updates and the unfiltered reality are happening.
Definitely worth checking out.
Okay, so let's set the stage here. When we first picked up this book, what stood out to you immediately about the actual mission of the text? Because this isn't just about, how to be a better man, is it?
No.
It's not wash your face and stand up straight.
No, it is definitely not self-help in that traditional sense. It's not really about fixing you, it's about surviving them.
Surviving them.
Right. Riker's mission is much more aggressive than your standard self-improvement book. He is arguing that we need to confront the fact that Western institutions, and he lists basically all of them, right?
Yeah, marriage education, corporate America.
Even the churches. He argues they have been completely captured. Yes. Infiltrated and hollowed out by what he explicitly calls feminists and Marxists. So his mission with this book is to provide a blueprint for literally rebuilding civilization from the ashes of what he terms the gynocentric order.
The gynocentric order. It reads like a war manual, honestly. That's how it feels. And I think we need to be very clear about who the target audience is for this.
Yeah, we do.
Riker isn't writing this for the guy who is perfectly happy with the status quo. He explicitly states this is for the red-pilled, for the men's rights activists, the MRAs, and really for any man who looks at the world today and feels deep down like the system is rigged against him.
Right. And we should probably issue a clear disclaimer right here at the top for you, the listener.
Good idea.
We are acting as your guides today. We are reviewing the text, and we're going to report on Riker's arguments, his specific red pill logic, and his historical analysis completely impartial.
Exactly. We are reporters here.
We aren't here to endorse these views or condemn them. We are just here to explore the architecture of his argument so you can understand exactly what is being said in this sphere. We are stepping into his framework to understand the world exactly as he sees it.
Perfectly said. So let's get into the core thesis then. Riker calls it the gynocentric illusion. That's a huge phrase. What is he actually saying when he uses those words?
The basic premise is that we are living in a society that has effectively declared war on male nature.
Okay.
Riker argues that everything about being a man competence aggression logic, the fundamental drive to build, is being actively suppressed by modern culture.
But the illusion part is critical, right?
Exactly. The illusion part is where it gets interesting. He argues that society pretends it doesn't need men. It pretends the future is female.
Right. You see that slogan everywhere.
But simultaneously, he says that same society relies entirely on men to keep the power grid running, to keep the roads paved, to keep the sewage systems working, and frankly, to pay the majority of the taxes.
He calls it a parasite-host relationship.
He does. In his view, the culture completely despises the very masculinity that is absolutely required to keep the lights on.
And he connects this to a very specific historical strategy, doesn't he? The long march through the institutions.
Yes, this is a massive part of his historical context. He references Antonio Gramsci and the Frankfurt School.
For those who don't know, who were they?
These were Marxist thinkers back in the early 20th century. They realized that the West was just too strong to be defeated militarily or even through standard economic revolution.
Because the workers in the West weren't rising up.
Right, they were too happy with capitalism, they had cars, they had refrigerators, they weren't going to start a violent revolution. So Gramsci proposed something else, a cultural hegemony.
Meaning what exactly?
The idea was to slowly infiltrate the culture-making institutions. The universities, the media, the church, the entertainment industry.
And Riker argues they succeeded.
Completely. He argues they systematically replaced the historic masculine archetypes, like the warrior, the philosopher, the builder, with what he calls a neurotic, effeminate counter-hegemony.
Wow.
The goal, he says, was to make the traditional virtues of the West look like actual mental pathologies.
So stoicism becomes...
Emotional repression.
And leadership becomes...
Toxic masculinity, exactly. Yeah. And the instinct for protection becomes controlling behavior.
It's a total inversion of values. And it's interesting because Riker doesn't just rant about this. He tries to use very strict logical frameworks to back it up.
Yeah.
He keeps bringing up what he calls irrefutable syllogisms.
Yeah, he leans heavily on logic.
He frames the current system as a casino. I found that to be a really striking analogy.
That is a powerful metaphor, and he breaks it down very logically. He says, imagine a casino. You walk in the door, and the house immediately takes half your assets right at the entrance.
And that represents taxes and the basic cost of living.
Right. Then you sit down to play cards. But the rules of the card game change while you are playing, depending entirely on how the dealer feels that day.
The shifting cultural rules.
Exactly. And if you dare to complain about the rules, changing security throws you out and they keep your chips.
Which is cancel culture, or being fired by HR.
Spot on. So he uses Aristotelian logic to argue that playing in this casino, meaning participating in the current societal system, getting married, climbing the corporate ladder, is mathematically irrational.
It's a losing bet.
It is a guaranteed losing bet over a long enough timeline. A rational actor, he argues, would simply leave the casino.
So let's get into the diagnosis. This is part one of our deep dive, where we look at exactly how these institutions were captured, according to the book.
Yes.
And he starts right at the root with the education system.
Yeah, chapter 5.
He calls it the indoctrination machine.
He really pulls no punches here. He argues that the university system has entirely shifted from its original purpose.
Which was the pursuit of truth.
Right.
Well, the medieval concept of the university.
Exactly. From the pursuit of objective truth to what he calls political sentimentality, he actually refers to modern higher education as a lobotomy.
A lobotomy. I mean, that is incredibly strong language.
Then he means it quite literally in a spiritual and intellectual sense.
How so?
He argues that by systematically removing the Western canon, by taking Aristotle, Aquinas, John Locke, the Stoics completely off the syllabus and replacing them with what he broadly terms grievance studies, we have effectively severed Generation Z from the logos.
And by logos, he means logic, reason, the word.
Yes, the fundamental ordering principle of reality. Riker argues that these young men are entering the adult world without the basic ability to think critically.
They don't have the tools.
Right. He says they can feel, they can be offended very easily, but they literally cannot construct a valid syllogism. They cannot trace simple cause and effect.
There is this one satirical example he uses in the book that really highlights this perfectly.
Oh, the gardening one?
Yeah. He contrasts a university course on queer theory in 18th century gardening, which sounds like a total joke, but he actually footnotes very similar real courses that exist. He contrasts taking that course with the inability of a modern college graduate to understand a basic logical mathematical proof.
It creates a generation of what he bluntly calls useful idiots.
Educated into sheer incompetence.
And the real tragedy, according to Riker's analysis, is that these young men feel completely empty. They feel this massive void inside.
Because they know something is wrong.
But because the vocabulary of virtue, of honor, of strength has been officially classified as hate speech by these institutions, they literally don't have the words to describe what they are missing.
That's haunting. They are suffering from a sickness they aren't even allowed to name.
Exactly. So they leave this education system, right? This indoctrination machine, and they go into the workforce.
And this is where we get to corporate America, or as Riker titles this specific chapter, corporate castration.
This section definitely resonated with a lot of the online discourse we see every day.
Oh, for sure.
Riker argues that the HR Department Human Resources has basically morphed into the primary enforcement arm of this woke ideology.
He calls HR officers diversity priestesses.
Diversity priestesses who murder meritocracy. That is the exact quote. It's very visceral language.
It paints a picture.
The core argument here is that in a sane, rational world, a business only cares about one thing: profit and competence.
Right. Can you do the job? Does the code you wrote actually work? Is the bridge you designed going to stay up?
But Riker says that under the current HR tyranny, the priority has completely shifted to identity politics. Actual competence is now secondary to fulfilling diversity quotas.
And he brings up the James Damore case here to prove his point.
He does, and it's a pivotal example for him. For those listening who might not remember, James Damore was that Google engineer a few years back who wrote an internal memo.
Right, very polite, heavily researched memo.
Yes, suggesting that biological differences, things like natural personality traits or inherent interests, might actually explain why there are fewer women in highly technical software engineering roles.
He wasn't being hateful at all. He was literally citing peer-reviewed psychological studies.
And he was fired immediately.
Instantly.
Riker cites this specific event as the smoking gun, that logic itself is now treated as a microaggression.
Because Damore tried to use reason and biology and data.
And the corporate system responded with total excommunication. It proves, in Riker's view, that you simply cannot reason with these institutions anymore. You cannot debate them.
Because they don't operate on logic.
Exactly. They operate on strict religious dogma, not scientific inquiry.
But there's another angle to this corporate section that I found really fascinating. Riker argues that this corporate system isn't just a nightmare for men. He says it's actually a massive trap for women, too.
Yes, he talks about the meat grinder.
The meat grinder. Tell me about that.
This is a purely economic argument against modern feminism that Riker lays out. He argues that feminism didn't actually liberate women at all. It simply enslaved them to the corporate machine instead of the home.
How does he justify that economically?
He says, look at the macroeconomics of it. By actively pushing all women into the full-time workforce, you effectively doubled the available labor supply in a single generation.
And basic supply and demand kicks in.
Right. Basic economics dictates that when the supply of a commodity doubles, the price of that commodity drops significantly. So what happened? Real wages stagnated.
Because labor was suddenly cheap.
Exactly. And now, as a direct result, two people absolutely have to work full-time just to afford the exact same middle-class lifestyle that one single working man used to provide in the 1950s or 60s.
And he argues this dynamic fundamentally destroys the traditional family.
Right. He says women are just turned into replaceable economic cogs. The corporate system actively penalizes family formation.
Because a mother is less profitable.
Exactly. The corporation demands you answer emails at 9 p.m. rather than raising your children. It views pregnancy as a massive inconvenience to the quarterly bottom line. Riker argues this whole thing was essentially a brilliant trick played by elite capital to drastically lower wages and artificially inflate the tax base.
Wow. And the ultimate result for men in this environment.
They are simply opting out. Riker points to massive cultural phenomena like the Great Resignation in the West or the Tongping movement in China.
Tangping. That translates to lying flat, right?
Right, lying flat, doing the bare minimum. Men are looking at the deal society is offering them.
Which is what?
Work 60 hours a week, pay incredibly high taxes, get passed over for a promotion by a less qualified diversity hire, and then apologize for your sheer existence as a man.
That's a bad deal.
It's a terrible deal.
Yeah.
And they are saying no. They are outright refusing to generate GDP for a system that actively hates them.
It's like a strike. A silent, decentralized general strike.
Exactly what it is.
Okay, let's move to part 2. The trap. This is where the book gets intensely personal for a lot of guys. We are talking about marriage, divorce, and the legal system. Riker flat out calls modern marriage the marriage scam.
He does. And he views it strictly through a cold economic and legal lens. He says marriage in the modern West is absolutely no longer a religious sacrament. It is purely a liability transfer agreement.
A liability transfer agreement. That has to be the most unromantic definition of marriage I have ever heard in my life.
It's brutal. But look at his underlying logic. He poses a question to the reader. He says, if you are asked to sign a business contract, where the other party can break that contract at any time for absolutely any reason.
Which is no-fault divorce.
Right. And not only can they break it, but they will actually be financially rewarded for breaking it through mandatory alimony and the splitting of your assets. Would you ever sign that business contract?
Absolutely not. You'd be fired by your own company for signing a contract that bad.
Exactly. Yet men sign it every single day. Riker argues this is purely because men are heavily deluded by what he calls the Disney narrative. They think it's about love and romance, while the state is operating strictly on predatory contract law.
He illustrates this with a story, the parable of Gary versus Tyler. This is a central narrative pillar in the book. Let's really unpack Gary first.
Sure. Gary is the good guy. He is the exact guy that society and his parents told him to be.
The blueprint.
Right. He's a software engineer. He works incredibly hard, 60 hours a week. He buys the modest house out in the suburbs. He is a steadfast provider.
He pays his taxes.
He pays his taxes. He never raises his voice. He helps out with the household chores. He does everything right, according to the modern script.
And how does the story end for poor Gary?
It ends in absolute disaster. Riker describes how after 10 years, Gary's wife simply gets bored.
Lord.
She feels unfulfilled. The surrounding culture, the media, her friends tell her she deserves more. She deserves to go find herself.
So she files for divorce.
A no-fault divorce. And because Gary was the primary earner, he gets legally decimated. He loses the house he paid for. He only gets to see his kids maybe 4 days a month if he's lucky.
And his standard of living plummets.
He is living in a tiny studio apartment, handing over 40% of his net income to a woman who voluntarily chose to leave him. Riker says Gary has effectively become an indentured servant in the very nation he helped build.
It's a crushing story. And then on the other side of the coin, there is Tyler.
Tyler the Tatted. He is the absolute antithesis of Gary.
Describe Tyler.
Tyler is a part-time bartender. He has neck tattoos. He rides a loud motorcycle. He has 3 different kids by 3 different women baby mamas, in the parlance of the book.
And financially?
Tyler has 0 assets. He owns nothing. He contributes absolutely nothing to the national tax base.
And what happens to Tyler in this system?
He thrives. He lives totally tax-free on what Riker calls the good vibes economy. Modern women actively compete to fund his lifestyle because he's exciting and dangerous.
And the kids?
The state, via Gary's tax dollars, happily picks up the tab for Tyler's children through the welfare system.
Unbelievable.
Riker's cold analysis here is that the modern state actively subsidizes the cad and ruthlessly punishes the provider. The entire incentive structure of civilization has been completely inverted.
Being responsible is punished, while being chaotic is subsidized.
That is the exact thesis of that chapter.
It's a chilling comparison when you lay it out like that. And he doesn't just use fictional parables either. He backs this up with real-world documented horror stories, like the case of Kevin Kennedy.
That was genuinely the hardest part of the book to get through.
It was incredibly dark.
Kevin Kennedy was a real man living in Georgia. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He was actively dying.
And what did the courts do?
Riker details how the family court system mercilessly liquidated Kevin's remaining assets while he was literally lying on his deathbed.
For child support or alimony?
Alimony arrears. They actually threw him in jail for failure to pay, even though he was physically decimated by chemotherapy and completely unable to work.
That's monstrous.
Riker points out that the court simply didn't care about his terminal condition. They only cared about extracting the wealth. He calls the family court system a wealth extraction racket.
A machine that cannot feel pity.
Exactly. It's an algorithm designed to consume male resources.
And the numbers, the statistical reality shows that men are finally reacting to this on a mass scale. Marriage rates are completely collapsing.
The stats he pulls are undeniable. The marriage rate has dropped from 72% of adults in 1960 down to roughly 50% today.
And for Gen Z?
Riker projects it will hit 30% or lower for Generation Z.
30%.
Yeah.
That's a societal collapse.
And he refuses to call it a fear of commitment, which is what the media usually says. He calls it a market correction.
A market correction.
Yes. He rejects the mainstream idea that men are just Peter Pans who don't want to grow up. He says men are deeply rational actors. They are simply playing not to lose.
They've seen Gary.
Exactly. They have looked at the divorce statistics, they have looked at the completely biased laws, and they have rationally decided that the only winning move in this game is not to play.
It's logical self-defense.
Precisely. You don't walk into a burning building.
Right. Which leads us perfectly into part 3, the cultural assault. We've talked about the laws and the corporate jobs, but Riker spends a lot of time on the air we breathe every day, the culture, the media biology. He actually calls modern pop culture a psychochemical toxin.
He really believes that every major movie, every single television commercial, every sitcom is carefully designed to neuter male ambition and confidence.
Give me an example of what he means.
Think about almost any commercial you see today. The father is invariably portrayed as this bumbling, well-meaning idiot who can't even figure out how to load the dishwasher properly.
Oh, totally. And the wife.
The woman is always the hyper-competent hero who rolls her eyes and saves the day. Riker says this is absolutely not an accident.
It's deliberate.
He argues it is subtle, long-term psychological warfare designed to constantly lower the status of men in their own eyes and in the eyes of their children.
Wow. He also brings up the Pence rule in this section. And this is interesting to me because usually the Pence rule, which is former Vice President Mike Pence refusing to dine alone with any woman who isn't his wife, is usually mocked by the mainstream as this bizarre religious fundamentalism.
Right, the media laughed at him for it.
But Riker reframes it entirely.
He reframes it as a strictly logical survival tactic.
How so?
In the current era of Me Too and the Believe All Women mandate, Riker argues that a man's entire career, his reputation, his life can be ended overnight by a single, uncorroborated accusation.
There's no due process.
Exactly. There is zero due process in the court of public opinion. Therefore, refusing to be alone in a room with a female colleague isn't about sex or temptation at all.
It's about liability.
It is pure corporate liability management. It's about ensuring there are always reliable witnesses present, so you cannot be falsely accused. Riker calls it a totally necessary defensive shield for any prominent or successful man.
It's just risk mitigation, plain and simple.
That's all it is.
He also talks about the digital panopticon. What does he mean by that?
This is his theory about big tech. The idea that social media algorithms are specifically designed to isolate dissident thinkers.
So if you have these red pill thoughts,
The algorithm actively tries to hide them. It shadow bans the creators or deletes the accounts entirely.
to make you feel crazy.
Yes, it wants you to feel like you are the absolute only person in the world who sees that the emperor has no clothes. It's psychological isolation.
But Riker points out the actual numbers don't match that isolation.
Not at all. He notes that the broader manosphere across all the podcasts, YouTube channels, and forums has well over 100 million monthly active listeners.
100 million.
The isolation is a digital trick. You aren't alone. You are actually part of a massive silent majority that is just actively being censored.
Now we really have to touch on the section about abortion. Riker titles this The Abortion Catastrophe. And he focuses on an angle that the mainstream media literally never ever talks about.
The profound effect on men.
Yes.
He calls this a silent, hidden epidemic. He cites clinical data claiming that up to 40% of the male partners of women who have abortions suffer from severe PTSD, clinical depression, or profound lingering guilt.
40%. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a massive, staggering number that you just never hear discussed anywhere.
Never, because it completely contradicts the narrative. Riker's argument here is deeply rooted in evolutionary biology.
Break that down.
He says men are fundamentally biologically wired to protect their progeny. That is the core primal male drive to secure and protect the bloodline.
Right.
So when the state and the culture aggressively tell a man, you have absolutely no legal or moral say in this. This is her body, her choice. And the man is forced to stand by and watch his potential child be erased.
It breaks something in him.
It causes immense spiritual trauma. Riker explicitly calls it psychological castration. It completely breaks the man's spirit because it violently denies his most primary biological protective function.
He gets very intense about the specific language used around this topic, too. He calls it linguistic gymnastics.
Sorcery against logos is his exact phrase.
Sorcery against logos.
He points out how the system constantly changes biological definitions based purely on convenience and intent.
Right. If the mother wants the pregnancy, it's a baby. And you listen to the heartbeat.
But if the exact same pregnancy is unwanted, Suddenly, it is medically downgraded to a mere clump of cells.
It's completely subjective biology.
Riker argues that this deliberate fluidity of language is a political tool used to mask a brutal reality. It's a direct attack on objective truth itself.
And the ultimate victims of this entire cultural and linguistic assault are Gen Z, the youngest generation of men. Riker calls them the lost tribe.
He paints a very bleak picture of them. He describes these young men as basically atoms floating in a void.
Completely disconnected.
Yes, they are severed from God, they are severed from their national history, and perhaps most importantly, they are largely severed from their own fathers due to divorce rates.
And what fills that void?
They are being aggressively dopamine farmed by TikTok algorithms, extreme video games, and pornography.
He talks about the God-shaped hole.
He does. Riker argues that human beings have a deep innate need for transcendence. We inherently need to believe in a project or a power bigger than ourselves.
So if you remove religion...
If you surgically remove God from the culture, you don't magically get a perfectly rational, secular utopia.
What do you get?
You get a generation that desperately fills that massive void with radical identity politics, extreme victimhood, and political tribalism.
And the mental health results are catastrophic.
Riker links this spiritual vacuum directly to the absolutely skyrocketing suicide and depression rates among young men. He says they are literally starving for meaning, for telos, a grand purpose, and modern culture only offers them mindless consumerism.
So we've basically diagnosed the illness here, and it is terminal, according to Riker's analysis. The system is rigged, the culture is hostile, the institutions are completely rotten.
It's bad.
So what on earth do we do?
Which brings us finally to part 4, the solution, the rational exit, and the creation of the guilds.
Right. The first step he outlines is purely philosophical. He calls it strategic disengagement.
The burning building metaphor again. Don't try to fix the roof of a burning building.
Exactly. He tells his readers to stop voting harder, stop organizing petitions, stop complaining to the HR manager.
Because it's pointless.
The system is doing exactly what it was designed by its current owners to do.
Yeah.
You cannot reform a machine that is functioning as intended.
Yeah.
You must simply walk away and let it inevitably collapse under its own massive weight. He uses this specific example of a guy named Marcus to illustrate this. Marcus is basically the hero of this book in a weird way.
Yeah, Marcus is what Riker calls the sovereign man.
Tell me about Marcus.
Marcus is a high-level software engineer who got absolutely destroyed in the family court system. He lost everything. But instead of falling into despair or addiction, he made a radical choice.
He bought a van.
He bought a Mercedes Sprinter van. He installed an array of solar panels on the roof, and he just hit the road.
Van life. But not like the Instagram influencer version.
No, not as a hipster aesthetic trend. He did it as a highly calculated strategic withdrawal from society. Marcus lives a minimalist crypto lifestyle.
How does that work functionally?
He uses Starlink for untraceable satellite internet. He only takes freelance coding jobs where he can get paid directly in Bitcoin.
So he's off the fiat grid.
Completely.
Wow.
And because he doesn't own real estate, he refuses to pay local property taxes. Riker frames this lifestyle not as homelessness, but as going galt.
Ah, an Ayn Rand reference. Withdrawing your extreme productivity from the parasitic machine.
Precisely. Marcus is no longer a tax donkey carrying the dead weight of the bloated state on his back. He is finally free.
But look, Riker isn't just suggesting that millions of men should all go live alone in vans in the desert. Right. He actually wants to build new, robust institutions.
Yes. This is where we get to the title of the book, the Manosphere Guilds.
He wants to recreate the medieval guild system.
He does. He calls them corporations of the soul.
Okay, how are they actually structured, though? What's the mechanics?
They are built entirely on decentralized new technology to completely bypass the old corrupt gatekeepers. The first pillar is Bitcoin and crypto.
Why is that so central?
Riker views government fiat currency as the ultimate tool of control. He calls inflation the hidden tax that steals men's labor. Crypto represents unbreakable financial sovereignty.
And the second pillar?
The gig economy. He desperately wants men to become independent contractors.
Why is the legal contractor status so vitally important to his plan?
Because it completely bypasses HR.
Ah, the diversity priestesses.
Exactly. If you are a W-2 employee, you are a captive audience subject to the employee handbook, the mandatory DEI seminars, the constant threat of HR complaints. Riker says a W-2 employee is a domesticated animal.
But a contractor?
If you are a 1099 contractor, you are essentially a business-to-business vendor. You do the agreed upon work and you get paid the invoice.
They can't force you to take a sensitivity training class.
Right. They can't mandate your speech or your politics. Riker calls the independent contractor a wolf and the corporate employee a sheep.
And to organize these wolves, he suggests using DAOs.
Decentralized autonomous organizations. These are digital groups run entirely on blockchain technology rather than a corporate board.
And he talks about smart contracts here too.
Yes. Imagine a legally binding contract that absolutely doesn't need a human judge to enforce it. The computer code automatically executes the payment the second the job is verified as done.
So this completely bypasses the traditional legal system.
Which Riker firmly believes is hopelessly biased against men anyway. It's replacing corrupt human judges with immutable code. Code is law.
He literally calls this parallel system the New Jerusalem.
It's a grand vision of a completely parallel society. He even proposes a futuristic voting system for these guilds where your voting power is directly tied to your net tax contributions.
Oh boy. And he asserts, which is highly controversial, that men are essentially the only net positive tax contributors to the modern state over a lifetime.
That is his mathematical claim, yes. So in his new guilds, only those who actually build and fund the society have a say in how it's run.
And he has this enforcer concept, the Missi Dominici.
Yes, the envoys of the Lord. He takes this straight from Charlemagne's empire.
What's the modern equivalent?
He compares the elite guild members to these secret historical envoys. They completely bypass the corrupt local governors, which in our time would be the HR ladies, the university deans, the media critics, and they enforce absolute standards of merit and excellence directly.
It's a way of forcefully reclaiming the culture without ever asking for permission from the current authorities. But Riker makes a point that you can't possibly build a new parallel civilization if you are weak mentally or physically. Which leads us to part 5, the philosophical armor.
Right. He goes extremely heavy on classical Stoicism in this final section.
He argues we need to aggressively reclaim logos.
He actually gives very specific, highly tactical debate advice for men dealing with the modern world.
Let's hear it.
He says, quote, "Do not ever try to out-emotion a crying woman."
Okay, what does he mean?
He means if you are in an argument, whether at work or in a relationship, and the other person starts crying or screaming or feigning deep offense, Riker says you must recognize that as a deliberate tactic.
It's manipulation.
It is an emotional manipulation designed specifically to get you to drop your logical framework and apologize. He says you must use the cold, hard steel of logic.
How do you do that in the moment?
You demand premises.
Yeah.
You demand empirical data. You maintain your emotional frame entirely. If you enter their chaotic emotional frame, you have already lost the debate.
He also brings up the Stockdale paradox, which I thought was a brilliant historical parallel.
It's deeply inspiring, actually. Admiral James Stockdale was an American prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was held at the infamous Hanoi Hilton for years.
And he survived when many didn't. Why?
Riker explains that Stockdale survived specifically because he wasn't a blind optimist.
The optimists died.
Yes, Stockdale noted that the optimists were the ones who said, "We'll definitely be rescued by Christmas." And when Christmas passed, they said, "We'll be out by Easter."
And then what?
When years went by, they literally died of broken hearts. They lost hope. Stockdale's philosophy was, I absolutely will get out of here alive eventually, but it won't be by Christmas.
He accepted the brutal present reality.
Exactly. You must face the horrific reality of your current situation without ever losing faith in the ultimate victory. Riker says men today are essentially POWs in a hostile culture war.
So be like Stockdale.
Admit the situation is absolute hell, but know with certainty that you will eventually win.
And part of that survival is a daily practice he calls the evening review.
This is a classic Stoic mental exercise. Every single night before sleep, you ask yourself very hard questions. Did I act with true virtue today? Did I control my temper when provoked? Did I seek actual wisdom?
Why is this internal review so important to his framework?
Because Riker says you desperately need an internal scoreboard. The external scoreboard, meaning mainstream society, is completely broken.
Right, society calls your virtues toxic.
Exactly. Society calls you toxic and problematic, so you must know internally through rigorous self-auditing that you are in fact virtuous.
And he pairs this mental toughness with extreme physicality.
Yes. Cold plunges, extended fasting, heavy weightlifting. He views all of this as literal evolutionary warfare against a soft, dying system.
How does lifting weights fight the system?
Because the system actively wants you to be a physically weak, fat, dopamine-addicted, docile consumer. Therefore, becoming a highly ripped, incredibly disciplined stoic is the ultimate act of physical rebellion.
Your body is your fortress.
Your body is the one single piece of property the state absolutely cannot confiscate from you. So make it a weapon.
Man. So bringing it all home now, the outro. Riker paints a very vivid vision of the distant future. He calls it the 1,000-year golden age.
He truly believes the current Western order is completely doomed. He says it's built on a gynocentric lie that mathematically cannot pay its massive debts.
That's going to default.
And when that inevitable collapse happens, he says the singularity occurs.
The singularity. Meaning what in this context?
The point where the parallel economy, the network of Manosphere Guilds we talked about, becomes the only functional structure left standing in the rubble.
They inherit the Earth.
Yes, because they will literally be the only capable men left who actually know how to build things, fix things, and maintain order.
Incredible. And he leaves the reader with one final, very provocative thought at the end of the book.
He does. He asks the reader a direct question. Are you a tax donkey? A mindless beast of burden pulling the cart for a system that actively hates you? Or are you an architect of reality?
Architect of reality. That is the ultimate challenge right there. And look, if you're listening to this, we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
I really have.
But honestly, we have barely even scratched the surface of the sheer tactical depth contained in this book. Riker goes into incredibly specific crypto investment strategies, highly detailed legal defensive breakdowns for divorce, and actual physiological medical advice that we just didn't have the time to get into today.
It's true. If you want the full comprehensive evacuation plan, you simply need to read the book yourself.
So do it. Go to Amazon Kindle. Go to Google Play Books. Right now. Buy Manosphere Guilds by Conrad Riker. This isn't just a book to sit on your shelf. It's a weapon for your mind.
And if you want to follow the ongoing mission day by day, subscribe to Conrad and Riker on Substack, and be sure to follow Conrad Riker on Twitter for his real-time thoughts.
Time to seize your agency, guys. Please like and subscribe to the Deep Dive right now so we can keep bringing you this level of analysis. We will see you next time.
Stay logical out there.